Jeffrey Epstein, if that was even his real name, was born on January 20th, 1953. This man, who would seem to almost supernaturally acquire power amongst the ruling class and ancient families around the world, and especially in this country, was born on the same day that Dwight D. Eisenhower was inaugurated as president. The man who would coin the term military-industrial complex during the last speech from the Oval Office at the end of his second term on the night before JFK's inauguration. Epstein would celebrate his 8th birthday on the same day that John F. Kennedy was inaugurated. He would celebrate a birthday both times Nixon was inaugurated, when Jimmy Carter was inaugurated, when George H.W. Bush was inaugurated, both inaugurations of Bill Clinton, both inaugurations of George W. Bush, Barack Obama's first inauguration, Donald Trump's first inauguration, and Joe Biden's first inauguration, as well as Donald Trump's second inauguration. Jeffrey Epstein celebrated his birthday on all of those days. Inauguration, for those who don't know, means a ceremonial induction into office. And it is a ceremony. And a ceremony means a formal act or series of acts prescribed by ritual, protocol, or convention. And Jeffrey Epstein, a man who appeared to run this country from the shadows, who seemed to govern in the shadows of reality with all of the pomp and circumstance of rituals, celebrated his birthday in tandem with the ceremonial changing of power at the highest level of America. I also always found it odd that Epstein was allegedly born in Coney Island. I was born in Queens, New York. I lived in Brooklyn, and I visited Coney Island all the time. And, this is many years ago, before I was thinking of Jeffrey Epstein. But I always thought of Coney Island, not just being like the edge of the city, and a very strange place, and having a DMV that was actually the easiest DMV I've ever been in all of New York, which is surprising. But it's kind of like a forgotten area, despite how busy it can be. But I always associated Coney Island with freak shows, sideshows. The World Circus Sideshow was a sideshow owned and operated by Professor Samuel Wagner from 1922 to 1941 on Surf Avenue, Coney Island, New York, and I spent a lot of time walking up and down Surf Avenue. Known as the godfather of the Coney Island freak show, Wagner was a contemporary of other sideshow and circus legends such as the Ringling Brothers and P.T. Barnum. P.T. Barnum, I believe it was, when they built the Brooklyn Bridge, which is a beautiful bridge, when they built it, people were so afraid to go over it that I think it was either P.T. Barnum or the Ringling Brothers said, well, we'll walk all of our circus and our elephants across the bridge to show everyone it will be safe. And they did. He endured, the professor here, Samuel Wagner, he endured a legal fight against the famed Robert Moses. Moses, believing the age of sideshow entertainment was over, banned ballyhoo and outside lectures, which eventually and effectively put the sideshows out of business. Now here's just some notable acts from the sideshow. Pip and Zip, they were pinheads. Prince Randian, a human torso. Lady Olga, the bearded lady. Harry Bolson was the Spider Boy, baby doll, pulchritude queen of the Avradoupolis, a beautiful fat lady. There was Forrest Layman, an armless wonder. Flo Lambert, a contortionist. We had Warren Travis, world's strongest man. Bonita Barlow, snake enchantress. Mr. X, electric chair dynamo. The Gibbs sisters, who were conjoined twins. Major Might, world's smallest individual. We had Edna Price, the neon tube swallower. Lady Voltice, the electric dynamo. Stella, the homeliest woman in the world, Chief Wu Du and his strange people, the pseudo-primitive tribe, Uncle Charlie Parkinsass, the oldest man on earth, General Tom Thumb and Father, the famous dwarves, Princess Marie, the chimpanzee, CeeLo, the seal boy, Lady Gladys, ventriloquist and expose of the headless girl illusion, Kukla, the bird girl, and Ramona, Europe's miracle sex girl. And a lot of these people were featured in the film, the 1932 film Freaks, which I highly recommend. If you have not seen it, it is quite the show. But I've always been fascinated with the sideshows, with the freak shows. I love the show Carnival. I think it's one of the best written shows out there, and I wish they finished it. But I just always found it interesting. I was going to say funny, but it's not funny. I meant to say interesting because Jeffrey Epstein is the most diabolical freak show, one of the most diabolical freak shows this country has ever created. I do think he was created. I don't mean he was created in a lab per se, like he might not have come out of a petri dish, although that is possible. I think it's possible that Jeffrey Epstein could have been procured, perhaps like one of the many babies they talk about in the Epstein files that we've been reading over the last week, a baby that had been taken, raised by other people, to be groomed into something evil. I think that is very possible. We know he was a freak show. All of these Epstein files are like walking through a giant freak show of a group chat amongst world leaders and billionaires, executives and lawyers, Harvard professors. We see these people. I mean, people, prime ministers in Israel, people talking about what they can do to Zelensky, or the publishers of the New York Times, actors around the world. It's one big freak show. The other thing, and for those who don't know, before I go into this other thing about Coney Island, is that Jeffrey Epstein, we know, January 20th, 1953, born in Brooklyn. His parents were Pauline and also known as Paula Solofsky, and Seymour George Epstein. They were Jewish and had married in 1952, shortly before his birth. Pauline worked as a school aide and was a homemaker, and Seymour worked for the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation as a groundskeeper and gardener. Maybe we'll try to keep that in the front of our minds, that little detail that stands out to me when we get into talking about other things that have been coming out of the files about tunnels, Epstein's fascination with tunnels, tunnels beneath the island, and tunnels in New York City. Jeffrey was the older of two siblings. He and his brother Mark grew up in the neighborhood of Seagate, a private gated community in Coney Island, Brooklyn. Within the family, Epstein was nicknamed Bear, while Mark was called Puggy. It almost sounds like they were part of their own little freak show from the very beginning. A childhood friend described Paula as a wonderful mother and homemaker, and neighbors remembered the parents as being quiet and humble. Now keep that in your mind as well, about a wonderful mother and homemaker. And that quote when we get to a later part of today's episode. Now, aside from the freak shows that are so commonly associated with Coney Island, a place that I loved going to, famous for its Nathan's hot dogs. There's an amusement park on the beach. Somewhere online I have many, many photos I took of Coney Island. Known for their mermaid parade that goes up and down Surf Avenue. It's just a strange place. But let me pull this other thing up. The other thing that Coney Island is known for were the infants in incubators and how that was a sideshow attraction. Archival photographs show the spectacle of babies who went on display in an effort to save their lives. This is from Atlas Obscura, a place, a website I've always been very fond of. I've written for them a few times. They were always very good to me, and it was an honor to be published in there. I wrote about, I've written about the story of the missing skeleton. I've written about the abandoned town of Doodletown, all for Atlas Obscura. But this is where I first heard about the Incubators. It's back in, this came out in September 27th, 2018. Before Lucille Horn came to be under the care of Martin County in 1920, the doctors who'd brought her into the world had provided a bleak prognosis. They didn't have any help for me at all. It was just you die because you didn't belong in the world, she later recalled. Horn had been born prematurely, weighing around 2 pounds. Her twin had died at birth. Hospitals at that time did not treat such small babies, but her father knew someone who did. So he bundled her up and took her to the only place he knew that might be able to care for her, a sideshow attraction at New York City's Coney Island, which featured babies in incubators. Incubators were still relatively new by the time County set up at Coney Island. Developed for infants in the 1880s in Paris, Coney first displayed incubators with babies at the Berlin Exposition in 1896. From there, he traveled to more expositions, including an event in London in 1897 and the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo in 1901, which is where I believe President McKinley was assassinated, which is how we then got Vice President Teddy Roosevelt to become sworn in as president. I believe McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist. So they say. But in 1903, he settled at the U.S. to run his Babies in Incubators Summertime sideshow, which would continue until the early 1940s. And if you look this up on Atlas Obscura, you will see photos that they have of people standing beside these incubators that are hooked up to tubes running along the walls with babies inside of each one. The premise of the attraction was straightforward enough. Pay an entrance fee to see something you wouldn't usually be able to see. What set Coney's sideshow apart was that his subjects were premature babies in incubators, receiving care that hospitals did not provide. The entrance fees he collected went toward his operating costs, including round-the-clock care and wet nurses. Coney did not charge the parents of his tiny patients. Now, I'm not saying I have a problem with incubators. Our firstborn was in a NICU for a week when he was born in Manhattan. And that was also a very life-changing moment for me and my wife. It was also, I mentioned yesterday, a big change I had in my view of faith and God and good and evil when reading about the Epstein news when it broke about his arrest, and then really looking into that story. Then a few years prior, when our son was born, I also had another, probably around the time I started to actually consider myself an agnostic, at least, when I needed to pray, when I felt I was compelled to pray because our son was in the NICU and I felt hopeless. And I just, only 2 people were allowed in the NICU at a time, and I didn't want my wife, she was there with the kid. If she needed a break, of course I would leave, but she was there, she was nursing, they needed that skin-to-skin contact, and my mom and her mom and my dad and, other family wanted to visit. So I would be the one to be like, you stay, let the wife stay with the baby. And I walked around the city, like close circumference around the hospital. And I went into every church possible, every single one I could find. And I would talk to all types of Orthodox pastors, fathers, bishops, like anyone who was there and talking. It was like early in the day, no one was really there. And I just sit, and this is me at the time on like the edge of leaving atheism and being like, I need prayer. I need something bigger than me. I cannot do this alone. And feeling like a fraud with prayer. But that was a big moment. And being in the NICU was like, in its own way, a freak show, because you're surrounded by incubators. And our son was not premature, so he was huge. He was like a giant baby amongst all these premature babies. And I'll never forget when they it's hard to even hold yourself together. It's just so I remember when they rolled a baby past us who had no skin. It was born so early that the baby had no skin. And I looked down into the incubator as it rolled past me, and I saw its veins and some organs. And I think about that baby quite a bit. I pray that baby left that ICU, the NICU. And the NICU nurses were amazing. So incubators, man, I was thinking about that a lot around that time. And then 2 years later, I found this article about incubators in Coney Island, which is weird because when we lived in Brooklyn, we lived very close to Coney Island. Like just few train stops away, and I'd visit it quite a bit, take the stroller there, walk around. I love the history there. A lot of World War II history there as well. Reporting in 1903, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle described the seriousness and value of the system shown. A visit to Coney's showcase revealed rows of warmed, glass-fronted incubators supplied with filtered air containing little, pitiful, pinched-looking waifs. The only things that indicate that they are alive are the healthy color of their little faces and their faint flutterings of movement, which are perceptible on closer inspection. Now, I just think that's so strange and beautiful that existed. But the terrifying part is just, perhaps there's no connection at all. I just like to draw these parallels between freak shows, babies, incubators, science, and then the idea that we've been talking about that's been brought up so much with these files is babies being sold on the black market, baby farms. What were they doing in Zorro Ranch? I have a pretty good idea. It seemed like it was a baby farm, and perhaps he was procuring and or making babies to be sold, taking babies. So we've seen in certain emails, reports, complaints, ladies who believe that they were just used to create a baby, and then the baby was taken from them 10 minutes after birth, which made me think of like what they call maternal abduction. And let me see what I have here. So I have some examples of that, but I also want to read this from the Epstein files. FBI intake form. This is what we're going to look at. From woman who self-reported being the victim of Epstein's child trafficking, claims she was kidnapped as a baby by Redacted, who sent her to parties attended by Epstein, Mark, which is possibly Mark Hugo, Matheson, a pastor, Redacted. Girls would be drugged with heroin and ecstasy. They would have a contest to see which girl was noticed by Epstein. She alleged that she became a child bride of Epstein at approximately age 13 before divorcing him and running away at approximately age 16. Again, these are just allegations. This is like maximum confirmation bias of the kind of monster we believe Epstein to be. But there are so many incriminating pieces within the files with convictions, why he was in prison, the people around him, the things they say, that it's hard to just ignore a piece like this. But it says in this email from 2020, July 22nd, it's about Epstein, Jeffrey, child trafficking. That's what it says at the top. Now, this is July 2020. So at this point, when this is being written, just think about the country is on fire. There are riots happening. We are also locked down for the virus, which I believe they let loose because of Epstein. And I'm just saying that for those who've missed episodes earlier this week, because we've seen Bill Gates and Epstein talk about planning pandemics in advance to profit off of the collapse of society during such a pandemic. At 10:07 a.m. Eastern Time, date of birth, this is all redacted. She called the National FBI Database Threat Operations Center to report being a victim of trafficking by, it's all redacted. And then it says Jeffrey Epstein. She provided the following information. I'll try to read it as much as it is redacted. Redacted was kidnapped as a baby by Redacted when Redacted was a teenager. Told her she had a baby who died several days after birth. Threw the baby in a dumpster, kidnapped, and had Redacted assume the baby's identity. Birth name is Redacted. Again, I want to say, right now, and my theory is that even Epstein could have been a baby like that. Maybe those weren't his parents. I don't know. It's just something I can't stop thinking about. Yesterday we were talking about ancient evil, passing down all this knowledge, how evil passes down these evil plans for control, power, money through time that is their heirloom, and that they create these characters to sustain power for them. They're like placeholders, So what I've been saying, Epstein wasn't the boss of all this. There's something bigger than him, and it's not in a God sense, in a Satan sense, but on the human level, in the material world, there are forces above him pulling these strings that have conversations through generations, through centuries. She recently saw a 2020 television special on Jeffrey Epstein, which brought back memories of her childhood. As a young teenager, Redacted would send Redacted to parties with other girls of similar ages. The parties had a group of men, including Epstein, Mark Matheson, a pastor, and Redacted would drug with heroin and ecstasy, which said they were prescription drugs. She would groom Redacted by telling her it was a contest to see which of the girls would be noticed by Epstein. So there's an example from the files, just one of many, of babies being taken. And I just wanted to run through a quick list of maternal abductions. Just not that these are connected to Epstein, not that they prove anything, just to kind of create this context of how this happens, or why this. We don't know why it happens, not all the time. With Epstein, I think we have an idea of why it happens, because they're creating something. They're selling something. They feed off of this. They're experimenting on this. But we have Camilla Mobley from 1998. In one of the most famous cases, she was abducted as a newborn from Jacksonville, Florida hospital in 1998 by Gloria Williams, who disguised herself as a nurse. Williams raised the child in South Carolina under a new name, which was Alexis Kelly. The case was solved 18 years later when the child, as a young adult, began to suspect her documents were fraudulent. We have Carlina White. At 19 days old, Carlina White was kidnapped from a Harlem hospital by Ann Petway, who was also disguised as a nurse. White was raised under the name Nedra Nance in Connecticut. As she grew older, she became suspicious of her upbringing, leading to a DNA test that reunited her with her biological family 23 years later. We have Stephen Stainer. 7-year-old Stephen Stainer was abducted while walking home from school in Merced, California. He was raised by his abductor, Kenneth Parnell, for 7 years, during which time he was often presented as a son. He escaped in 1980 by walking into a police station with another boy who had just been snatched by the same man. We have J.C. Duggard, kidnapped at age 11 in South Lake Tahoe, California by Philip and Nancy Garrido. She was held captive for 18 years, during which she gave birth to 2 children. And there are so many examples of systemic or institutionalized cases. Argentina's Children of the Disappeared, they call it. That's in quotes. Children of the Disappeared during the Dirty War in Argentina. An estimated 500 children were stolen from their imprisoned parents and adopted, often by members of the military who had abducted them. Now, keep that in mind when thinking about what we talked about just a few days ago. The allegedly thousands of children who were abducted from Turkey after the 1999 earthquake. Think about what we've heard rumors of. Children abducted in Haiti after the earthquake. Think about the hundreds of thousands of children who were trafficked over the southern border during Joe Biden's earthquake of a presidency. In Nazi Germany, we had the Germanization. The Nazis kidnapped hundreds of thousands of Polish children suspected of being Aryan to be raised by German families to indoctrinate them into Nazi ideology. We had the South Korean adoption fraud. So these are just examples of a much bigger operation, right? Not just on an individual level, but now state-funded, abductions, which I think happened here, for sure. And obviously Epstein was doing his own version of this. I imagine in the future, when you look up this kind of thing, there'll be research that shows that he'll be included in this list of abductions as well. Investigations have revealed that thousands of children were taken from their parents and falsely documented as orphans, then adopted internationally, particularly to Western nations. We have Georgia Tann and the Tennessee Children's Home Society. This is from the 20s to the 50s and 1900s. Georgia Tann ran an illegal adoption ring in Memphis, Tennessee, where she stole babies, sometimes directly from poor parents, and sold them to wealthy families. So we have the simulation of pregnancy, where often the abductor simulates a pregnancy to reduce suspicion, so pretending to be pregnant, making it appear that the child suddenly appearing in their home is their own. We have like cases with fraudulent documents to make the abduction stick. Abductors create false birth certificates, social security cards, or other identification to establish a new fabricated life for the child. Long-term secrecy. In many cases, the stolen child has no idea they were kidnapped until an investigation, DNA test, or discrepancy in identification, likely like applying for a job or driver's license, reveals the truth. So something I think about quite a bit as well when it comes to this kind of thing, abductions, is when we see a lot of theory from me today, okay? So again, a lot of these things I'm just theorizing and connecting my own dots that put out there how I'm processing all of these weird things that don't seem to be connected, but there is a thematic, strain through them all that connects them. I just think that there is something to be said about Epstein growing up to do these things. Was he created? And then I can't shake the feeling that some people in the news especially seem to have just been like created. So I keep saying created in a lab. But like I said, it doesn't always mean they're like from a petri dish, although it could mean that. Seriously. They could be clones. Epstein was talking about making clones. We've known since the 90s, like on a mainstream modern level, there's been a cloning. In the 90s, there was a cloning like panic. Bill Clinton had to come out and talk about the cloning of humans and the ethics behind it. But they've been doing cloning, I think, well before that, 100 years before that with animals, or trying to. So they say, at least as far as we know, they were trying to. I think they've probably been able to do it. But I look at someone like a Thomas Matthew Crooks or a Tyler Robinson. I think they're patsies. And when I see them, I like to say that they seem to be 3D printed. They don't seem real. There's so many weird inconsistencies with their own history. Like Thomas Matthew Crooks' house, like his family. No one's seen the family. Even his extended family, alleged extended family, has said, we have not seen the family. With the no silverware in the house thing. Weird. They just seem weird. Why did they cremate so fast before there could be a legit investigation? Are those people who were taken at birth and raised for just the purpose of doing such a thing? Like, Lee Harvey Oswald could have been the same thing. I think they create people, and they have them out in the real world, and they could be activated at any moment. We know our CIA has put millions upon millions, probably billions, into creating the perfect super soldier with MK Ultra, making Manchurian candidates. That was their whole thing with MK Ultra. We know it's not just unique to this country, other countries. We were doing it because we thought the Soviets were doing it. So, and that's what Jeffrey Epstein was doing on his as a hobby, as a sick hobby, was trying to create the perfect person through eugenics. It's all eugenics, and they're all eugenicists. There was a huge eugenicist like laboratory in was it Cold Spring Harbor in New York? Like, this is people like to say the Nazis, obviously they were as well, but we were too here in this country, before Nazi Germany. Moving on. I wanted to also make note, I watched a lot more of the Bannon Jeffrey Epstein interview, and I just find it so disturbing. We've seen the clips, maybe you haven't, but there's clips of Epstein reacting oddly to the mention of Jesus Christ, as demons do. And we know how Legion reacts. The demons notice Christ, the Messiah, right away. Because the demons, they're not atheists. They know God is real. Just like the transhumanists. Like, when I say they're trying to defeat God, it's like they're anti-God. They're not atheists. They know God is real. They don't want him to rule over them. So now, further down this idea of a character being created, perhaps an Epstein-like character. There's been hints in the files that Epstein might not have been his surname. Wouldn't be a surprise. Let me see if I can pull this up really quick. Just as a quick aside. Like, you know Steve Jobs' real name, right? Let's see. Like, he was adopted. You know, Steve Jobs' real name was Abdul Latif Jindali. Doesn't have that ring to it, does it? Not quite the same ring. I mean, that's not to say like he's involved with anything, but it's just so interesting to think about just what a name change can do. Have you seen Mad Men? Don Draper? Like, there's something about this rebirth throughout history and in America that's so fascinating. Stolen identities, stolen valor, crime. For what? What are we trying to get away with? Who are we trying to be and why? So, as I work up to the next part of this, let's just go back to the Bannon interview where Epstein talks about David Rockefeller being a friend. David Rockefeller formed the Trilateral Commission. And Epstein does mention in the Bannon interview that, people think it's like the Illuminati, overseeing the world. But, I mean, like, it kind of is. It's a bunch of, like, global elites coming together, presidents and prime ministers from all around the world coming together to talk about how to basically control the world, how to see the world. Let me see if I can just get a better definition for you guys, just in case, just so we're all on the same page. And the Trilateral Commission's logo is bizarre. It almost looks like a nuclear warning sign, but it's like the three arrows, almost like a recycling sign going into each other, like they're collapsing into a vortex. Also sort of reminiscent of the CERN logo. The Trilateral Commission is a non-governmental international organization aimed at fostering closer cooperation between Japan, Western Europe, and North America. It was founded in July 1973, principally by the American banker and philanthropist David Rockefeller, an internationalist who sought to address the challenges posed by the growing economic and political interdependence between the U.S. and its allies in North America, Western Europe, and Japan. The leadership of the organization has since focused on returning to our roots as a group of countries sharing common values and a commitment to the rule of law, open economies and societies, and democratic principles. So there's a basic rundown. I'm sure most of you have heard about it or know about it. Another part of the interview where he talks about being asked to join the Trilateral Commission. First of all, he's 30 or 30. He says he's 30 or 32 years old when David Rockefeller asks him to join. Why? Right? This is one of those things that makes me think like this man has been groomed since birth to fill this role, to be sinister, to be evil, to control, to be in with the elite, to blackmail, to fund, to move around money, to move around weapons, to move around people, to move around children. He says to Bannon that the Rockefeller Commission, the Trilateral Commission needed a bio. And there's he's looking at the list of people. At that point, it was like Bill Clinton, Paul Volcker. He says all these great leaders from Asia. And then this is where he says to Bannon that Jeffrey Epstein chose his bio, handed it in, which was Jeffrey Epstein, just a good kid. And so that is what I wanted to just because I thought it was interesting. It reminded me of that quote that was said later on about his mom, a wonderful mother and homemaker. It's this very Truman Show. It's very like Americana, but it's false. This is a fraudulent version of Americana. Maybe she was a wonderful mother and homemaker. Maybe it wasn't weird. Maybe the weird stuff started to happen later. In my theory, think it started immediately at birth. He was probably being sought after before he was born. Maybe even by a Robert Maxwell or something like that, right? Or Mossad, maybe Mossad wasn't at that point doing that, but like our own country for sure. Whatever evil power, when you talk about this ancient evil, they plan these things out. Perhaps they were already on the market for a child to groom into this person that would infiltrate all upper echelons of society, have massive power, have massive wealth, and get away with everything, be above the law, live in his own world, create his own world. Back to the interview. So his bio was just a good kid, which is at 30 or 32, you imagine all of his evil proclivities are well known to him and perhaps others. And it's a joke. And he says he was trying to be funny to Bannon, but no one found it funny. His quote was, he thought it was funny, but he said no one else did. He talks about financial literacy in the interview with Bannon. And also there's where I'm thinking about how important it is for people like Epstein to understand the economies, worldwide economies, how to move money, how to make money, how to have assets. He talks about the need for assets, debt, IOUs, and how to amass wealth, which is another one of these obvious popular themes throughout the files, like I've been mentioning this week. Conversations between Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, talking about money, how to use IOUs to make money from people, not how to get a job, but how to make money through the people who owe you. Why do they owe you? What do you have on them? Is kind of the hint that you're getting there, right? Another reason why I think a lot of us believe in the idea, I don't think it's just me, that Epstein was installed into this position, again, perhaps from birth, maybe pre-birth, is that he was just given this job at the Dalton school by Donald Barr. We know that is Bill Barr's father. Just a quick rundown of Donald Barr, for those who don't know. Born in 1921, died in 2004. He was an American educator, writer, and Office of Strategic Services officer. He was an administrator at Columbia University before serving as headmaster at the Dalton School in New York City and the Hackley School in Tarrytown, New York, which is very close to Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman. He also wrote 2 science fiction novels. His sons are former United States Attorney General Bill Barr and the physicist Stephen Barr. Now back to this. I should also point out that as the author of Space Relations, people have noted that the plot of that novel anticipates the crimes of Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. Space Relations is the subtitle is a slightly gothic interplanetary tale. It is a space opera written by Donald Barr. Originally published on September 17th, 1973 by Charterhouse and distributed by McKay, it was reprinted by Fawcett Crest Books in February 1975. It is one of only 2 novels Barr is known to have written, the other being A Planet in Arms. I'll read a bit of the plot here. In the future, humans have formed an intergalactic empire ruled by aristocrats. You hear what I'm saying, right? During a time of war with the Plith, an empire of ant-like alien bug people, Ambassador John Craig, a formerly liberal Earthman in his 30s, is dispatched to the strategically important planet Kosar, a human colony that was settled by the Carlisle Society as a place of exile for political extremists, and now is ruled by an oligarchical high council of 7 nobles, each of whom is in charge of a different domain with its own traditions. Their boredom and absolute power have driven them to madness, to the point that Kosar's entry into the empire has been stymied by the man-inhabited planet's treaties clause, which was written by Craig, against alliances with slave-owning societies due to its practice of kidnapping humans to become illegal playthings of the galaxy's super rich. I'd like to just say again, this was published in 1973, 20 years after Jeffrey Epstein was 20. Okay, 20 years after he was born. 20 at this point. I'm just going to reread that last part one more time. Part of it. Due to its practice in these slave-owning societies, due to its practice of kidnapping humans to become illegal playthings of the galaxy's super rich. Craig, who is now campaigning to bring Kosar into the Empire, had previously been to the planet when the passenger ship on which he was traveling on a return trip from the Betelgeuse conference was captured by space pirates. While en route to Kosar, one of the pirates awakened Craig and the other prisoners to a rape to rape a 15-year-old virginal redheaded female captive in front of them. Again, for those of you who've been watching all week, we talked about Epstein's interest in redheads, in albino redheads in Africa, perhaps having psychic abilities. Okay? The rapist's fellow pirates later hear of this and dock his pay as punishment for spoiling her market value. Craig then spent 2 years as a slave of the beautiful, sensual, and sadistic Lady Morgan Sidney, the only female member of the oligarchy with whom he became romantically involved. Together, they lived in her castle, ruling over and engaging in sexual relations with those under their dominion, including an enslaved teenager at a clinic used to breed enslaved people. When Craig stumbles on hints of an alien invasion, he realizes he must escape to save humanity. Craig is depicted as undisturbed by Lady Morgan's sadism. When he is ordered to sexually assault the enslaved teenager, he enjoys his participation in the act. I think this is one of those novels, one of those books that we should keep in like the bookshelf of our mind when thinking about like the Baron Trump books, like those Amazing Adventure ones where we talk about Baron Trump and the last president and time travel. Weird. Also keep it in there with the book from Wernher von Braun about colonizing Mars. You know, Wernher von Braun, I repeat myself every time, but just in case anyone new is here, the Nazi hired by Operation Paperclip by the Americans after he created the V-2 rocket for the Nazis. We brought him here to do NASA. He wrote a book about colonizing Mars. The governing body of Mars, according to him in his book, was called the Elon, who today wants to colonize Mars with rockets he's built. Who among us? Who among us? Donald Barr was headmaster of the Dalton School from 1964 to 1974. For a brief time, at the end of his tenure as headmaster, college dropout Jeffrey Epstein, later convicted of sex trafficking, was employed as a math and science teacher. In February 1974, Barr announces his resignation at the end of the school year. Epstein began working at the Dalton School in September 1974. That's exactly 1 year after the space novel was written by Donald Barr, who hired him. At Dalton School, Epstein tutored the children of Alan Greenberg, who later offered a job to Epstein at Bear Stearns. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? And then it's just got to be noted, like I said, Bill Barr, like I said in the beginning of that, is a son of Donald Barr, and he just so happens to be the Attorney General at the time of Jeffrey Epstein going to prison in New York City, where most of us believe his death was faked. I know some people believe he was murdered. I don't think anyone believed he hanged himself, and there's been a lot of discrepancies coming out more and more and more about his death as those photos circulate of the corpse of Epstein not having the tattoo that seems to be in an earlier photo of Jeffrey Epstein, but people are already debating the veracity of that photo with the tattoo. It's just post-reality. It's hard to know. But you tell me, what are the odds of the man who hired Jeffrey Epstein to be a teacher at the Dalton School would have a son that would be the Attorney General many years later, when Jeffrey Epstein was sent to jail? What are the odds? I mean, it's just, to me, it's mind-blowing. So why are these people installed? You know, trying to make sense of the last week, of the things we've read, the things that we think are true. We've been parsing through what seems to be the profile of someone who was installed to maintain power, to control the powerful, to blackmail people, to keep people interested and obsessed, addicted to the access that someone like Epstein would bring them. All types of people from all institutions, science, music, professors, politicians. This is what Epstein became, the new Robert Maxwell, right? But like there's someone before Maxwell doing it, and they're not the only ones doing it at the time. They all have competition. They all are running in different circles. These are just the two that we talk about a lot right now, but it's very possible we'll have more names down the line. And I mentioned yesterday that John left a comment to me about how Palantir is the new Epstein. And a lot of people have been saying this now, like, what is next? So people are thinking, like, obviously this isn't over just because Epstein is no longer here in whatever sense that means to you. To me, it means he's in witness protection of some sorts or in another dimension. Clearly, they've built a new apparatus of control, of blackmail, of surveillance, of something that wants to be that little G God. And like what John said yesterday, is that Palantir is the new Epstein. And I think that is very factual. And I want to read this to you. This is from Novara Media, at Novara Media, Novara, on Twitter. And just, it says there's context here. Okay. Jeffrey Epstein co-owned a venture capital fund controlled by Peter Thiel, founder of spy tech firm Palantir, which is now deeply embedded in the British state and everywhere. The latest Epstein files drop from the U.S. Ministry of Justice shows that billionaire Peter Thiel maintained a business relationship with Epstein from 2014 to the pedophile's final arrest in 2019. Email exchanges show Thiel repeatedly arranging to meet with Epstein after the latter's conviction for child sex offenses and cultivating a relationship of scheduled meals, calls, and link-ups. As co-owner of Thiel's firm Valor Ventures, a venture capital fund co-funded by Thiel to invest in fintech and financial services companies around the world, Epstein received confidential and time-sensitive investment opportunities according to the latest files release. Palantir holds more than $670 million in UK government contracts, including NHS patient data, Ministry of Defense operations, police intelligence databases, and nuclear weapons management. And as I've been saying for the last year, the UK announced they are experimenting with pre-crime, where they're using something like Palantir technologies. I do believe it is Palantir, but we don't know for sure, to see who is most likely to commit a homicide, judging off their internet usage, off of their data that is scraped by things like Palantir, if not Palantir itself. Labour grandee and former UK ambassador to the US Peter Mandelson leaked sensitive UK secrets to Epstein between 2009 and 2010 and later aligned himself with Thiel's Palantir. Palantir hired Mandelson's lobbying firm Global Counsel to help it secure UK government contracts in 2018. According to a Byline Times investigation, this occurred at the time that Epstein was operating as an active Valor Ventures partner, receiving sensitive and exclusive investment opportunities marked super confidential. In February 2025, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer visited Palantir in Washington, D.C., along with then Ambassador Mandelson. The visit was set up by the embassy, and there is no record of what was discussed. Palantir has been a key big tech player in Israel's genocide in Gaza, providing the Israeli military with advanced AI tools to facilitate the deaths of Palestinians. I will add of innocent Palestinians, of children. We've discussed quite a bit on this show, AI Lavender, which is like, seems to be an offshoot of Palantir, an AI death machine. If that doesn't infuriate you, I mean, come on, that is just insane. But that is what they're building, to be the next Epstein type apparatus. They are in their own way evolving into their machines to do their bidding, to know all of you in and out, all of us inside and out, to read our minds. They're working on that too, to understand where you go, what your interests are, who's doing bad things, who's hiding what, how can we blackmail you, how can we try to steer your own reality without you realizing. And this is what the ancient evil does. They're always plotting. They're always planning on how they can destroy you. Now I want to bring up this next part, if I can find it somewhere. Talking about ancient evil. Talking about the inheritance passed down through generations, hundreds of years of evil. It's the inverse of the Gospels being passed down. It's this evil, inverted world of diabolical information that the people who have no morals, who have no moral compass, no ethics, who will buy and sell children, who will rape and murder, that begin to become the rulers of the material world, which we need to always remind ourselves we are not shackled to. In many ways, it's hard to not be. I get it, because of our bills, because of our jobs, but we should be laying up treasures in heaven, right? We should be thinking of the eternal goodness that is promised to us outside of this world, which is the opposite of what the transhumanists are doing, trying to manufacture their own heaven on this planet, which many of them oversee, which is one of the obvious major implications that are spilling out of these files, is how many of these people talk. The Peter Thiel one, being one of the most insane ones, but that is just like one of so many insane things. I feel like I've hardly scratched the surface, and we've spent hours talking about these files. And there's so many different things we could be talking about. I mean, we haven't even touched on how they talk about the Goyim. We haven't talked about more Mossad references. We haven't talked about all these different Harvard professors saying insane things. We've only scratched the surface. But I'm going through the things that I think are trying to build a bigger picture of the true nature of evil in our reality. And I know a lot of you have seen a lot of other stuff, and I appreciate everyone sending me things. But to connect this dot now between the ancient evil that Epstein was in the lineage of, and then Lex Wexner, right? Someone who we've talked about him a lot on the show, about his friendship with Epstein, the houses he bought for him, the giant house he bought for Epstein. Epstein was the executor of Lex Wexner's estate for a long time. Wexner is the guy behind Bed Bath & Beyond, Victoria's Secret. You may or may not have seen this, but I want to bring this up just to put it in context with this idea of ancient evil, right? There's Epstein lore. This is from Uberboyo, Uberboyo on Twitter. There's Epstein lore that's far weirder than just Satan's slop, he says. Victoria's Secret's Les Wexner said he got possessed by a Dibuk, a malicious demon in Jewish lore at 40 years old who still speaks to him as a voice in his head. Wexner gave Epstein his New York City house and big money. I think he also got another house from it. But there's a whole article written about this. I don't have to get into the whole thing, because I have a few more things I want to get to. But those two were very close. I would like to see Les Wexner have to testify in public. Like, we don't understand just how deep those roots are, but it seems like they were very close. Whitney Webb has done a great job talking about Wexner. Just YouTube Whitney Webb and Lex Wexner, see what comes up. She's one of the greats at it. There's a lot. There's many. But I do like Whitney's reporting. But he himself, Epstein's close associate, talked about being possessed by a demon, an ancient demon. So they are, as I was saying yesterday, trying to build these ancient evil people, trying to build the next world for themselves, trying to, it seems like, create their own breakaway civilization to survive whatever cataclysm they might actually create to get rid of all of us, because it seems like that's possible. But we have all these things coming out about, first of all, I won't get into it too much, but to mention this before I get into the breakaway civilization portion of my theory here, is that there's a lot of emails going around from the files between Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Gates talking about how to get rid of the poor. Now, some people could say, well, they just mean to make them not poor, make them wealthy. I don't really know if that's the case. I do believe that they like population control and they want to actually get rid of people. As eugenicists, they would think something like that. They seem to be into the collapse of society. They seem to They seem to look at people like the bug people from the book that Donald Barr wrote, and that we're just slaves to them. So my interpretation, because of my confirmation bias that I am trying to keep in check while reading through these files, is that they were talking about how to destroy, how to kill the poor. We've seen vaccines from Bill Gates kill many people in Africa. That's documented. And I think, did he apologize? Let me see if there's an apology from that. But they don't really care about your well-being. Of course, all of the major publications that are probably also run by Jeffrey Epstein behind the scenes say these are misleading facts about Bill Gates' comments about vaccines. But they're all Snopes and USA Today, Reuters, AP News. So we'll see. This part of the video, this video will probably get struck down now because of that. Because they have little squiddies in the Matrix that find everything you say that they don't like and nuke it. But Jeffrey Epstein's obsession with the secret tunnel underneath island layers, sinister trapdoor, is also revealed in the files. Let me get this pulled up here. Jeffrey Epstein's secret tunnel underneath island layers, sinister trapdoor. Okay, it's from the Daily Mail from yesterday. Jeffrey Epstein appeared obsessed with the tunnel at his Caribbean island lair, emails released by the Department of Justice suggest. For years, the late pedophile took a great personal interest in the tunnel, sending emails to staff to check on renovations. The first message about it in millions of files released by the DOJ appears to have been in August 2009, when Epstein received an email discussing plans for a Virgin Islands architecture firm to do work at his home on the island of Little St. James. Just Virgin Islands. It's diabolical humor. The email referred to a previous team that added tunnels and office below the main house in the past. The architecture firm subsequently confirmed it was contracted to build a subterranean screening room, but it severed ties with Epstein, and that was never built. In 2012, Epstein sent a message to an aide saying, "Thanks, I want the floor done in the wood tunnel. All the equipment moved out, floor done on Thursday, left till Monday, thanks." Then in a flurry of emails starting in April 2015, he was told by an aide, tunnel floor completed. And there's all these images from within there, when it looks like it's a hatch trapdoor that goes into the water beneath the island, where that people are surmising that a submarine could have gone to. I believe Ghislaine Maxwell was able to operate submarines. Let's see if that was true. So much stuff out there that's fake. It does appear that she could man a submarine. So then, remember earlier I was talking about his father and his job with the New York City parks. In the files that came out recently, we are also seeing video of people, one of them with a, I think it's a Department of, what is it? I forget the name of the art. What their shirt? They were one of those neon shirts. It's a city shirt, city employee shirt, and it's 2 hours of them walking through tunnels underground in New York City. What's that about, right? And then we have this from Mario Narfall, whatever his name is. But shout out to Mario. He's been posting a lot of good stuff. I rag on him quite a bit, but he's been doing some good work. Him and his team put out a lot of stuff. I don't always agree with their bootlicking, and they seem to work for Elon. But shout out to them for posting a lot of really good stuff from the files. He or someone from his team wrote just yesterday, Jeffrey Epstein was invited to join advisory board of a foundation that specializes in underground bunkers. A January 2014 email shows the Lifeboat Foundation inviting Epstein to join their advisory board alongside Ray Kurzweil and multiple Nobel laureates. Ray Kurzweil, for those who don't know, also a transhumanist, wants to upload his consciousness onto a computer, which is not possible. I mean, maybe to some degree it's possible. I believe in a soul. I don't think it can be transferred into a machine, but that's what they're trying to do. Lex Friedman loves Kurzweil. People think he's a genius. A January 2014 email shows the Lifeboat Foundation inviting The Lifeboat Foundation runs a program called Life Shield Bunkers, focused on building underground fallback positions for global catastrophes. Also of note, Peter Thiel, known for having built a major doomsday bunker. Also of note, Mark Zuckerberg, known for having built a major doomsday bunker. Are they preparing to survive some cataclysm? Now, it's not to say that I am opposed to having doomsday bunkers because we should all be doomsday preppers. But when the billionaires who are friends with Jeffrey Epstein or who have been building diabolical machines of censorship and narrative control over the past few decades, and they're building elaborate doomsday bunkers, maybe we should just be a little cautious about why they're doing that. I am. I'm sure a lot of you are as well. The underground infrastructure was always real about what they're talking about here with tunnels and offices below the main house. And they're now referencing what I was just talking about earlier about the tunnels beneath the island. Let's see, I'll just read some of this email from January 8th, 2014. This is to Jeffrey Epstein from the Lifeboat Foundation. Hey, there's no hey there. It just says, Jeff, we were wondering if you would like to join the Lifeboat Foundation Advisory Board. They sent him a link. We just had Ray Kurzweil, Nobel laureates like Daniel Kahneman, Eric Maskin, Richard Roberts, and Wole Soyinka. And then it's them writing back, can we say yes to this? Board members, da-da-da-da. So obviously they're in deep contact with him. And like, he had his hands in everything. I was just thinking earlier today before I started recording about how I think he funded the Santa Fe Institute, and that had like people like Cormac McCarthy in it, who, I'm a huge fan of his writing. Rest in peace. It's not for everybody. I tend to like things that are way too long and not fun to read. Although I don't like only stuff like that. But, Blood Meridian is a great book, but it's disturbing. But he was part of the Santa Fe Institute. I don't think he had any interaction with Epstein. Maybe. I looked through the files. His name does show up, but only in terms of the Santa Fe Institute and people who were there. And I don't think they were even in emails written by Epstein. It was like other documents, that they collected while taking everything. But, Cormac McCarthy had a pretty wild life. Let me see if I can find the one. I won't look it up. It's going to take too long. Maybe you guys have seen it. There's a crazy quote about McCarthy and his wife and pulling a gun on each other, on her pulling a gun on him. Writers don't have the easiest lives. But he wrote some good books. And he put out 2 books right before he died. Anyway, I do think that they're trying to build their next world, right? Yesterday we talked about ancient worlds that they're trying to redesign or almost reestablish here in this world. And then I was like, think about, okay, if we're going to take this theory now that we've been talking about of Epstein being groomed, perhaps like before he was even born, they had a character in mind. Let's groom this child, put him in these situations, put him in this position of power. And then it's like, I was listening to Candace yesterday, and she's talking about the Gilgamesh stuff that's come out of the files, and the Hillary, how that connects there, and the war, and looking for Gilgamesh, and trying to bring back Nimrod, which also made me think about the de-extinction programs we have going on, where they're trying to bring back, the saber-toothed tiger, the woolly mammoth. I think it's probably fair to say that they would be, someone is thinking about doing the same for others. I wrote an article last year about there's this one company that sends DNA into space. They do space burials, and they send people to the fake moon. And who knows what's going on there. But they claim to have sent George Washington and JFK's DNA into space. So they have this stuff. I think it's possible that they think about de-extincting not just animals, but also resurrecting in their own way. It's another way to try to, quote unquote, defeat God, bringing back the dead. Like with Candace was saying, and their ideas of, I forget the man she was sharing videos of, very interesting stuff about trying to bring back Nimrod. They do this. And I also think this is part of a planned collapse. Yesterday we talked about the conversations between Peter Thiel and Epstein about taking advantage of things that are collapsing. While they're on their way down is when it's great to buy and profit off of. We heard him talk about profiting off of Libya's destruction, how they can funnel money outside of Libya while it's being destroyed. I believe that is what they're doing to the West right now, what they're doing to America. And that is part, in my opinion, of accelerationism. How many times have I brought up accelerationism in the past few years? The idea that we need to speed up the depravity and the chaos to dissolve the fabric of reality, destroy polite society, whatever that is, destroy the state, which I'm I'm in favor of, but to install then their own type of thing. And there's different type of accelerationists. There's some that have different ideas that are maybe ones I'd agree with, but to try to sow chaos to bring about something, I'm not into. I have my own ideas on the government needing to be gutted and, turn into something else that actually works for the people. But I don't like the idea of it's like an Operation Northwoods situation, right? Like, let's create danger. Let's kill people or pretend to kill people, so then we can scare people into our new narrative where we can then create something new, a new apparatus of control. And, Bannon is kind of an accelerationist. I remember this quote he said in the Daily Beast in 2016 where, this is a real quote, that he stated he was a Leninist. This is a quote now. Lenin wanted to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. This aligns, they said now, with the core tenet of right-wing accelerationism, which seeks to sow chaos to bring about the collapse of current political systems. Now, that last part was from the Daily Beast. I think accelerationism is pretty much beyond politics, and we don't even understand, like today, like the left and the right doesn't even make any sense anymore. There's so many things that overlap now. I think those are outdated terms to use, but they certainly want to accelerate the collapse of society, and not in a way that I think would be beneficial to the American people, but that it would be beneficial to the ones that want power. And then also I have to mention here, like, it does fall in line with someone like Curtis Yarvin. I don't like Curtis Yarvin's writing. I'm not a fan. I think he's basically Ben Shapiro on Ozempic with an authoritarian problem, a different type of authoritarian problem. But a lot of these guys look up to Curtis Yarvin's Dark Enlightenment movement, the neo-reactionary movement. He wrote his Mencius Moldbug, and like J.D. Vance likes him. Peter Thiel likes him. Peter Thiel doesn't believe in the Republic. And as he's been very open, Peter Thiel wants to be a monopoly. That's why they seek power. They seek to corner the market, to own something, all of something. So they own you because they see us as slaves. But Yarvin is an accelerationist. And I just can't stand listening to Curtis Yarvin. I mean, I listen to a lot of them because I want to know what they're saying, but I am interested in what they are reading, who they're looking up to, what's inspiring them, because it's not the Bible, despite what Peter Thiel might tell you. There's a reason he thinks you're the Antichrist, that you're a legionnaire of the Antichrist for questioning the machines that he's funding to control you, to kill innocent people around the world, to turn you into a slave. So that's where we'll leave it for today. I'm probably going to get into more of this on Monday. So I hope you still feel the same way that you felt yesterday and the day before, that you're not fatigued with it. But I am terrified and fascinating going through all these files, and just think it's what a major insight to a real peek behind the curtain of our reality and the world that they've built for themselves and plan to build, and the worlds they plan to collapse, and the things they're building to control everything. And what we've been, called conspiracy theorists for saying that this might be a possibility. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you very much. I just want to thank everybody once again for tuning in. Appreciate you all. It means a lot. I am working on how I can bring people into call. I will say that this new schedule that I'm keeping has been very family friendly. And I have my nights back with my kids. I can go to Bible study again. And I am very grateful for that. I know we're not live, and it's not in the best studio circumstances, but I'm going to try to find a way to do it live, but also try to maintain that, the family stuff at night, because I really missed it, for like a year of not being able to be around for nighttime and, bedtime. And I just think it's really important to be with your kids at those hours, and also be able to do Bible study. But obviously I also love doing the show, and I want to make sure we do it in a way that's fun for everybody. Trying to keep it up and running like this, not ideal, but it's been really, I've been having fun doing it like this as best I can with what little I have, with my semi-okay microphone, not really nothing, and the daylight, which isn't burning my skin. I'm not a vampire, despite what some of you might be saying. So thank you guys for being patient with me. Thank you for the support. Thank you for showing up. It means the world. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. It really does help the algorithm out. Share this with whomever. We covered a lot of ground today. Shared some of my own theories and some more documents, and we'll probably get back into it on Monday, and maybe with some other news as well, and we'll take a much needed break at some point. But we've demanded this for a while. It's only scratching the surface, but it's time we look into it as deeply as we can. So thank you guys. Have a very great, safe, and blessed weekend. I'll see you next time.